A big show for you. We got reports on the top rookie pass catchers that were taken in this April's draft. Which one is under the most pressure on day one? We have that answer. Plus, who better to give us some insight into what Jordan Love learned last year than some of Aaron Rodgers' backup quarterbacks? We're going to discuss all of that with Mina Kimes, Jeff Darlington, Kimberly Martin. It's NFL Live. It's Friday. We're heading into the summertime. Great to see everybody. But we are going to start today's show in Pittsburgh, where the Steelers made some news yesterday by releasing veteran guard David DeCastro. Cut saves the Steelers $8.7 million in cap space, and they moved quickly to replace DeCastro by signing free agent guard Trey Turner. But this all comes after longtime center Marquise Pouncey retired, and the Steelers lost offensive lineman Matt Filer and Alejandro Villanueva in free agency back in March. So big changes for a unit in charge of protecting 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. Jeff, how did this all come about?
Well, Dan, as if we didn't already have all these questions about the offensive line, then DeCastro comes along and is dealing with what he now says will be another ankle surgery. He is not sure whether he'll continue his career. He says that he would be happy to hang it up if indeed his ankle can't recover in time for the season. But this is certainly a situation facing this Steelers team that makes things even murkier. Now, we should point out they did sign Trey Turner, a guard who has some Pro Bowls to his resume. He did miss 9 games last year, but now this Steelers team will be with 4 new starters on the offensive line. One other important note, though, here is that they struggled last year, so perhaps they can just get better with a new group, Dan. But it's going to be tough times for the Steelers.
Right, I mean, that's a good point, Mina. I mean, this was a rough offensive line last year. Look, the team kind of sold out to bring Ben Roethlisberger back for probably 1 more year, or who knows, maybe 2. But how big a concern is this offensive line and the way it stands in front of Roethlisberger as of now?
It's a massive concern. Now, to be fair, as Jeff said, it was a massive concern last year as well, and a big part of the reason why the Steelers offense struggled so much down the stretch, why the run game struggled, why Ben Roethlisberger was throwing the ball so quickly. But, you know, just because there's change doesn't mean that it's going to be changed for the better. There are just question marks across that line. I know they like Dotson. There's hope that Zach Banner, who's a young tackle, can come up as well. And as you guys said, Trey Turner, you know, he had some good seasons in the past. Last year, of course, was battling injuries. But this is a far cry from, you know, the Steelers line of a few years ago under Mike Munchak, right, when they were one of the better lines in the NFL. And I think it's a good example of how quickly a really great line, a top 5 line, can suddenly find itself at the bottom of the league. And it's hard for me to see a world in which the Steelers offense looks better than they did last season if Roethlisberger doesn't have better protection.
Yeah, so one-dimensional. Last year they were first in the league in pass attempts per game, 28th in the league in rush attempts per game. And with the release of DeCastro, you know, they only have 1 starter of their 2020 offensive line return. They also have other business to take care of here. Free agents to be. Quarterback Roethlisberger, wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster, Chukwuma Okorafor, who's going to move to left tackle. TJ Watt's going to need an extension. Minka Fitzpatrick at some point is going to need an extension. The Steelers have a lot to do financially, and they don't have an offensive line to build behind. We'll see how that goes. Team that knocked the Steelers out of the playoffs last year, the division rival Cleveland Browns, made a point of trying to upgrade their defense this offseason. Part of that effort was the signing of veteran pass rusher Jadeveon Clowney to replace Olivier Vernon on the defensive line. Clowney, changing teams for the 3rd year in a row, spoke during the Browns' recent minicamp.
I've been training extremely hard this offseason, so I kind of already had a feel of where I was at coming here. I wouldn't have came if I wasn't healthy. I would have told them the same thing. I felt great coming in. I feel great now.
Over the last 2 seasons, Clowney ranks top 10 in the NFL in pass rush win rate and pressures per game, but just has 3 sacks to show for it. You know, he's never had 10 sacks in a season. And sure, he's missed 11 games due to injury over that last 2 years, but Cleveland is definitely going to need him to convert some of those pressures into sacks, or at least turn them into sacks created for his teammates there, Mina. So what does Clowney bring to this Browns defense?
I think he brings a lot. Sorry, I'm laughing at 211th. I didn't even know there was 210 guys to rank above him. But the thing is, Dan, I feel like Jadeveon Clowney, like we've almost reached a point where he's underrated. For a while, there was a lot of criticism of him around the league that he was overrated coming out of college because he wasn't able to turn that pass rush production into bringing down the quarterback, which is why he, of course, ranks 211th. But for all of that, he is still incredibly disruptive, especially on the inside, which is where I suspect you'll see him lined up a lot next to Myles Garrett. And he is an elite run defender, and that matters a great deal for this Browns team because while the defense made a ton of additions, particularly on the back end, which I believe Kimberly's going to talk about, they also had some really significant losses on the defensive line at tackle. Larry Ogunjobi is gone. Sheldon Richardson is gone. They're counting on young players and draft picks like Tommy Togiai to step up. And what would help those players a lot is if Jadeveon Clowney is able to bring that elite run-stopping prowess, that tackling, those tackles for losses that he did in previous stops to this defense. And I think he has that in him because he is still a very, very good player. He's just not one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
Yeah, Dan, as Mina just talked about, adding Jadeveon Clowney, great move. But I'm looking at this secondary because that to me was the question mark all last year. I covered a lot of Browns games. So what do the Browns do in the offseason? They upgrade the back end. Rams had great defense last year, so they bring in John Johnson, Troy Hill. They drafted Greg Newsome, a guy that they love, and you got Grant Delpit back from injury. So they've got a lot of players in this back end that are going to be much improved.
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about this secondary, Kimberly, is now they've just got bodies. I'm not really sure who's going to start, who's going to play where. Like Greg Newsome, you alluded to, their first draft pick this year. I don't know if he's going to get
Williams,
the starting position, or right, Greedy over Greedy, or how he is coming back from injury. Ronnie Harrison was decent at safety. Of course, bringing in John Johnson, who was elite in Los Angeles. But that's the beauty of these moves, is that defensive coordinator Joe Woods now has a lot of players to allocate towards the back end, whereas last year it kind of felt like they were just trying to survive schematically. I think the players that they did pick up, Newsome, Owusu-Koramoah, Johnson Hill, they all fit really well together. And I think as they try to compensate for some of those holes up front that I was talking about, particularly on the defensive line, having a better secondary, and you're correct, that absolutely was the weakness of the team last year, is going to be so helpful for Joe Woods.
And as a result, we now live in a world where preseason expectations are higher for the Browns than they are for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who would have imagined? Earlier this week, Raiders defensive end Carl Nassib came out as the first openly gay active NFL player, saying he, quote, finally feels comfortable enough to get it off his chest. Earlier today, his teammate Darren Waller was asked his thoughts on Nassib's announcement.
Guys are going to go in with the intention of, accepting him and loving him for who he is, because he's our teammate. It's not anything that's going to change just because he came out. Like, he's going to be the same person that he has been. He's just letting himself be known to the world. So, guys may have these, phobias or things like that, and that's human nature. Like, guys are going to have to work through that. We can talk through that. We can help guys overcome that and realize that, hey, he's a human being and he deserves to do whatever he does himself. And so that's what we're going to try to do. Will there be hiccups along the way? Will there be guys that have a hard time adjusting? Possibly. But we're going to try our best to make sure this is an environment of unconditional love.
Raiders start training camp on July 27th and open the season on Monday Night Football, hosting Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens here on ESPN. Coming up here on ESPN, after trading away a ton of draft capital to acquire Jamal Adams, are the Seahawks prepared to make him a $20 million man? Someone here thinks they don't really have a choice. And Baker Mayfield helped the Browns end their playoff drought, but was it enough to warrant a massive contract extension, or should the Browns wait? We will tell you after this.
If you're really in the game, then they might say your name in the Hall of Fame.
You got to check out this article from our Seahawks reporter Brady Henderson over on ESPN.com, where he poses the $20 million question: when will the Seahawks extend Jamal Adams? When indeed? Here is a reminder of what the Seahawks have already spent on Jamal Adams when they traded for him last summer, traded 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and safety Bradley McDougald for Adams, and a 4th-round pick coming up in 2022. So, Mina, given all that they paid to acquire him, do the Seahawks need to get this extension done?
They don't really have a choice, Stan. I mean, they made their decision the second they traded away all those picks you saw there, gave up their leverage. And this is something we've seen happen in the NFL before. I think of the Texans trading for Laramie Tunsil. When that happens, and a player doesn't have much time left on their deal, but a team gives up, a yacht full of draft picks for them, he's going to get paid. Now, whether or not he's worth it, I think, is interesting and debatable. Because on one hand, look, Jamal Adams is a phenomenal player, set the record for sacks at his position last year, incredibly disruptive, physical, a tone setter on that defense, an emotional leader, I think. But on the other hand, wasn't phenomenal in coverage. He was injured some of last season, and I do see how, as a football team, you're thinking about your roster and how you're allocating your cap, not wanting to spend that much money, $20 million, on a safety who isn't elite in coverage, given how pass-heavy the NFL is today. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where the Seahawks already gave up all those draft picks for him. And I will say, I do think he can rebound a bit in coverage this year because Seattle will have more depth up front, and they won't need him to rush the passer and blitz as much as they did last year. And he can focus more on getting healthy and on playing well on that side of the ball.
Yeah, they may not need him, but he is awfully good at it, and he plays all over, right? He played over 150 snaps at safety, linebacker, and cornerback, but most of those snaps came at outside linebacker, which is a big reason why he had 9.5 sacks, which led the team. It's been 3 years, 2 GMs, and 4 head coaches since the Cleveland Browns made Baker Mayfield the #1 pick in the 2018 draft. After 3 years, the rules say you can negotiate a contract extension if you and your team feel like it. Saw it last year with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, Deshaun Watson in Houston. Browns have already picked up Baker Mayfield's 5th-year option, which will pay him $18.85 million in 2022 if they don't extend him, but they might, just as the Bills might extend Josh Allen and the Ravens might extend Lamar Jackson. All 3 different situations, Jeff, that 2018 quarterback draft class up for extension. Do you think Baker could be the first of those 3 to get one?
Well, I do, and I wouldn't have thought that until Tony Grossi, longtime reporter covering the Cleveland Browns, spoke to Baker's agent and reported that, in fact, they do believe a deal could get done this summer, pointing out that they don't feel the need to wait on the Lamar Jackson and the Josh Allen deals to get done because the quarterback market has already set itself with other recent deals. Also pointing out they know what the cap will be in future. They feel like they have an idea that it will go up in the next 2 years. They feel like the parameters are set. Now, that being said, it's still a Browns situation where they do have him under control for this year and the 5th-year option. One other thing we should point out here is that generally these deals do happen June, July. That's when Patrick Mahomes got his deal done, Carson Wentz, going all the way back, Andrew Luck. Most of the time, when you get that rookie deal, that first big deal comes June or July. So we should be paying close attention to this one in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Jeff, the Browns have made it clear. They love Baker. They want Baker long term. The question is when, right? But they're not under any pressure to get something done now. Because as you said, they have that 5th-year option. And they have other guys, Nick Chubb, like Wyatt Teller. They've got guys that they also have to look after from a long-term perspective. So Baker, both sides want to be together. How much financially do they want to come to an agreement on it? I think this gets done, but really, the Browns, Andrew Berry, their GM, is not somebody who just spends money willy-nilly and says, okay, we've got to get this guy locked up right now. He can be patient because he knows that Baker is going to be the guy. Now, I did ask people around the league, what happens if they don't sign him? What if Baker balls out? Then the Browns have to pay even more money. And you know what? That's actually not a bad problem to have. If you're the Browns, okay, what's a couple more $1 million when your QB is balling out and playing at an elite level?
They call that the Dak Prescott plan, I think, in Dallas. It's interesting because Mayfield's fifth-year option number for 22 is lower than those of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson because they've hit performance benchmarks. Kimberly, what do you know about where things stand with the Ravens and a potential Lamar Jackson extension?
So that's another one where that's the one where everybody's like, okay, this has to get done, right? But it's similar in that if Lamar does ball out and they don't do a deal now, they're comfortable paying him because unlike Baker, he's been a league MVP. He's been to the playoffs every year that he's been in the league. And Lamar doesn't have a traditional agent. So I'm not sure how that is affecting things, whether it's slowing down the process or not, because his mom is his manager and handles his affairs, and they keep things very close to the vest. But the Ravens do want to lock up Lamar. I think this is the deal that actually would get done before Baker.
Yeah, Dan, this is such an interesting timing situation because we go back to the deals of Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, where those teams regret probably doing those deals as early as they did after the third season. And then the Cowboys, on the other hand, waiting so long with Dak Prescott and perhaps paying more than they would have wanted. GMs now are facing this unique dilemma of trying to walk that line of whether they should pay their quarterback after the third season or wait out that fourth year and do it before the fifth-year option. So tricky situation for all three teams, all three of which will try their best to address these situations in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, we will track those situations as the summer progresses. But next on NFL Live, we're tracking the Aaron Rodgers situation. With his status in question, backup quarterback Jordan Love could take some advice from his predecessor.
You down first.
And my teammates.
It's not so much what they did, it's really how they did it.
This was put in motion last year, and the wrench was just kind of thrown into it when I won MVP.
End zone touchdown!
Is he the MVP or what?
Thing of beauty!
It's just kind of about a philosophy. It's about doing things the right way.
Without a doubt, I think it's inexcusable that the organization let it get to this point.
If people make an organization, and sometimes that gets forgotten.
If you've watched any of our programming over the past 2 months, you're well aware that reigning MVP quarterback Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay and has been a no-show so far this offseason. Rodgers can be a tough guy to figure out. Some might say a complicated fella. So we sought some help from people who've been closest to him, his former backup quarterbacks. There's been quite a few since Rodgers took over as the full-time quarterback from Brett Favre in 2008. Our Sam Borden caught up with some of the understudies.
I'm Seneca Wallace, and I was Aaron Rodgers' backup for one season.
Joe Callahan, and I was Aaron Rodgers' backup for 3 years.
Brett Hundley, and I was Aaron Rodgers' backup for 3 seasons.
Graham Harrell, and I was Aaron Rodgers' backup for 3 seasons.
For more than a decade, you've known Aaron Rodgers for this.
Touchdown! 40-yard bomb from Aaron Rodgers.
Hail Mary answered again! Rodgers the magician.
But for anyone who spent any time in the Green Bay Packers quarterback room, Rodgers will always be known for something else.
A deep thought person. I mean, some of the stuff that, that he would come up with, and you're like, dude, did you just come up with that just now?
If I was going to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and play the little trivia night, I'd bring Aaron because he would be really good at it.
Rodgers' brain is put on display each week when one of Green Bay's backup quarterbacks puts together a test that's a little bit unusual.
The QB test for a backup quarterback in Green Bay might be one of your most stressful parts of the week. The first half is usually like football questions about the team that you're about to play and the defense that you're about to face. And then the second half, that's a little bit more on the fun side with trivia and riddles and funny videos. You really have to think about what you're putting into it.
You could get him every now and then on geography or something like that. Like history, he's sharpened. He's good in history, good in movies, good in music. And if you stumped him, one, he'd get mad at you, but he'd appreciate it in the long run. You know what I mean? Because he thinks he kind of prides himself in knowing a lot about everything.
He didn't like losing at all. I really hope Aaron watches this because I think the biggest thing that we had a battle was our body types, especially mine. I like to be very fit, six-pack, looking good, trim. And Aaron, his body fat percentage was through the roof most of the time when I was there. But I think that was the biggest struggle for Aaron. So like Aaron now, if you watch this, man, I hope your body percentage fattens down.
My rookie year, he invited us over for a little barbecue at his house, and then midway through the night, he broke out his karaoke microphone, which ranks how well you sing the song. Then we started duetting amongst the quarterbacks to see who could get the highest duet score, and that turned from just a fun little barbecue to us competing over karaoke.
How was Aaron as a singer?
He really sticks to some of the lower notes. He doesn't go outside his comfort zone. And I would definitely double check the calibration on that microphone because his scores seemed a little too high that day.
Backups in Green Bay quickly learned that Rodgers' interests range widely. Very widely.
We definitely had some conversations that were a little out there.
He's always thinking the crazy conspiracies. And so he's like, hey, what do you think all that stuff is flying behind that jet stream? Do you think that, has anything to do with maybe why everybody's getting cancer? That's just kind of his attitude. That's the way he's, wired.
You could go from talking about football then to talking about conspiracies about, who built the pyramids. And, there wasn't just one subject that we talked about.
Who does he think built the pyramids?
That's an in-house conversation. We can't reveal what we know.
A new backup has entered the room. First-round draft choice Jordan Love. And while some viewed the pick as disrespectful to Rodgers, his former backups know there's no better place for Love to be.
Green Bay definitely got the formula right the first time around with back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks. It gave Aaron maybe a little bit extra motivation.
If you see some of those young guys, he starts to build them up. He might tear you down first, and then he's going to build you up a little bit, but helps build that character and helps build that team camaraderie that you need.
Aaron's not going to give up that position, I'll tell you that. Jordan will be sitting for a while, but when time comes, whenever it comes, I'm sure Aaron will teach him what he needs to teach.
Rodgers' backups haven't seen the field very much since he took over as Green Bay starter in 2008. In fact, only two other Packers quarterbacks have more than 100 pass attempts over that span, and none of them have played well enough to post a QBR over 45. Since becoming the full-time starter, Rodgers has accounted for 89% of Green Bay's pass attempts. And Mina, in spite of what his former backups were saying, this team may in fact just be turned over to Jordan Love this year. If that is the case, what should the expectations be for the Packers?
Well, it would be quite different. So, backing up to last year, when Green Bay drafted Jordan Love, it was surprising, of course. It was the biggest surprise of the draft because Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, because he had so many years left on his contract. But it wasn't surprising in one way, Dan, which is that Jordan Love was seen as a prospect who would need time to sit on the bench, whatever team he went to. He wasn't expected to come in and start right away. He had amazing arm talent in college, beautiful deep ball, throwing on the run, but he did struggle with decision making. In fact, in his final year at Utah State, he threw 17 interceptions to 20 touchdowns. That, I don't need to tell you, is very unlike Aaron Rodgers, who has maybe thrown 17 interceptions in several years. I will say, for Jordan Love, the one thing working in his favor would be that I believe Green Bay's offense is very quarterback friendly, and I think it would be very friendly to his skill set in particular. They would incorporate a lot of rollouts, a lot of play action, a moving pocket, and I think the combination of that offensive line, which still has some stars, as well as Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan, it would be a good context for Jordan Love to walk into. But that doesn't mean the transition wouldn't be rough for the young quarterback, especially coming off of such a tumultuous offseason.
Yeah, Mina, with the head coach in Matt LaFleur, who can certainly groom him as well, I actually don't put the pressure on Jordan Love as much as I apply the pressure to the Packers front office. Because, by the way, how many first-round quarterbacks do we see that get to spend more than a season on the bench getting themselves acclimated? Like, if Jordan Love is not ready for week one, should he be called upon, the Packers never should have spent a first-round pick on him in the first place. Think back to when Jared Goff got drafted, albeit as a first overall pick. He was like 8 games into his rookie year and hadn't seen the field yet, and everybody was freaking out like he was the ultimate bust. Jordan Love has gotten a year. If he's not ready by week 1, quite honestly, in this day and age, he's not ready. And that would be a colossal mistake, in my opinion, an admission of a mistake, if in fact that's the case for the Packers front office.
In fairness, if memory serves, Goff was sitting behind Case Keenum, who was not, at that time, the reigning most valuable player in the NFL. Things are getting a little hairy in Washington, but maybe in a good way. Will the arrival of Ryan Fitzpatrick and his glorious beard lead to an explosion on offense for the Washington football team? We're going to tell you when we come back. 38-year-old Harvard man Ryan Fitzpatrick, who signed with the Washington football team this offseason. They also have Taylor Heineke and they have Kyle Allen. Kimberly, you recently spoke with Washington head coach Ron Rivera. What did you learn about their quarterback situation?
It's crazy to think about it that a 38-year-old guy could be the answer for you, but Ron Rivera is really psyched about having Ryan Fitzpatrick. We all understand he is a bridge to whoever the franchise guy eventually will be, but Ryan Fitzpatrick, you mentioned it, Harvard guy. He's brilliant when it comes to football. He's got veteran experience over 16 seasons, but more importantly, he and Rivera share that sort of moxie that Fitzpatrick almost has that YOLO, like, I'm going for it. I'm going to act like I'm Patrick Mahomes in this moment. He's going to let that ball go. And that sort of aggressiveness and that sort of veteran presence is what they lacked last year. I think if you ask anybody, the QB position was their Achilles heel. And a lot of people in that organization feel had they made a switch at QB sooner from Dwayne Haskins, that season might have gone a little differently. So Ryan Fitzpatrick brings all of the intangibles that they didn't have into an improved season.
Yeah, I would bet my life savings on the Washington passing attack being better than it was last year, largely because it would be impossible to be worse. You saw they were 32nd in the NFL. There is nowhere to go but up. But also because Ryan Fitzpatrick's been playing good football lately. He's pushing it downfield. And on top of that, I like the group of skill players they've got around him. I'm particularly excited with this move at quarterback for Terry McLaurin, who I believe in my heart of hearts has the potential to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He really has all of the skills you'd want in a true X: speed, size, contested catchability, route running. Last year, guys, his average depth of target was cut nearly in half by 5 yards. And I can tell you, that is not because of Terry McLaurin. That is because of the guys who are throwing him the football and because the offense was so conservative as a result. This year, the offense will not be conservative with Ryan Fitzpatrick under offensive coordinator Scott Turner. They've got a really complementary group of weapons beyond McLaurin, adding Curtis Samuel to man the slot from Carolina, and as well as drafting Diami Brown, who I really like as a Z receiver, and of course Antonio Gibson, the running back who broke out last season. This has the potential to be a much better offense than last year, and that begins with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I mean, I think sometimes we overstate the use of the term culture change and the impact that someone can have on the organizational culture. This is an organization that needs that culture change more than any other in the NFL, and it already got a boost with Ron Rivera. And being down here in South Florida, talking to members of the Dolphins organizations, I cannot emphasize enough how much Ryan meant to the people down here, on and off the field, in the business affairs side of things, and in the football building. I think the impact that he can have on that organization extends far beyond the playing field and will ultimately impact the playing field. So, yeah, look, I get it. We do overstate that. It becomes a cliche in the NFL to talk about the cultural impact of a player. In this case, I think it is very legitimate.
We'll see how it goes in Washington. Fitzpatrick's never been to the playoffs, and there hasn't been a repeat champion in the NFC East in 17 years. New on NFL Live, this is from Joe Burrow's Instagram account. We have folks combing Instagram for content for us during the show. Burrow writes, see you in September. Of course, his rookie season ended prematurely as a result of a knee injury, and he expects to be back, ideally, by week 1. Rookie camp, OTAs, and minicamp all in the rearview mirror. Another month till training camp. We're going to have reports on all the rookie pass catchers, including the one Burrow's team drafted. Which one is under the most pressure in their rookie season? Find out when we come back.
my soul.